Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Dylan Ennis, probably better known to the crypto community as Polar. I'm a lecturer or academic in University College Dublin, where I teach undergraduate and postgraduate crypto classes. My main research area is Ethereum governance, although recently has tended to focus on the Ethereum social layer, the wider stakeholder system, and the values that have become, let's say that this community has converged on, such as crops. Ethereum governance is complicated. In the academic sense, there's always been this distinction between the on-chain and off-chain. So on-chain meaning the specs as implemented in software clients, which is then distributed across nodes, right? So that's our architectural topology of the on-chain protocol. And then the off-chain part, meaning the management, maintenance, and upgrading of the protocol by core developers or developers, researchers, and organizers is one of the ways that I try to think about them these days. And this is done through a fairly informal process where the end result is something called rough consensus. You start off trying to build your case, championing whatever change it is that you want to see implemented. You have to do this, I guess, sometimes in social media, but also on forums, the Ethereum research and development Discord, various places of this kind. And eventually the idea is that your Ethereum improvement proposal, so the specs as written up, will eventually get discussed for inclusion in the all core devs call. Although these days, when you say ACD, there's actually many versions of these all core developer calls. And then, rough consensus is one of those, let's say, it's very hard to describe because it is itself something closer to there is agreement, a lack of controversy around something. So it's not very explicitly identifiable, say, in a call when that moment has been reached, although there is someone, the chair, who will finally decide that this is what we're going to focus on. Ethereum Foundation mandate is a document. It's a manifesto of sorts. It's a bit infamous, I think, at this point, because it essentially outlines what it considers to be the core values of the Ethereum Foundation. The document is specifically for employees of the foundation. That is its explicit remit. It's for everybody. If you work there, you'll believe in these crops values. Here's what those values are. And also lists a bunch of quandaries, so some case studies where you can see, okay, this is how we would maybe make decisions. At the same time, it was also published publicly. So I think even though it's a document for an internal audience, it's also clear to me that this was a signal to the outside of the Ethereum Foundation that this is what the EF is going to focus on going forward. The context of the document, I think, needs to be taken in we have to reference that in the year prior, there was essentially an attempt to make the Ethereum Foundation more pragmatist. So there was a little bit of a populist revolt of community members who wanted to focus on ETH, the asset, to be more institutional. And this saw a dual structure of Tomas and Xiaowei, and it's like kind of pragmatist and cypherpunk. And then the EF mandate, I think, was a statement that we're just going to be hardline cypherpunk. That's what the protocol is going to focus on. It also famously includes a pledge. So if you work in the EF, you were supposed to pledge. This is something I oppose personally. I think that this is an unnecessary request, given that the people who didn't come out the best from this would have been crops aligned anyway. But that's a different political story. I think crops represents an attempt to set some boundaries on at least what the Ethereum Foundation is going to focus on. So there was a growing demand for the Ethereum Foundation to, in many ways, actually mimic what the Solana Foundation is, which is this centralized entity that is very much leading the direction of what happens. So ecosystem development and so forth. And in Ethereum, that's not always been something that people wanted. They didn't necessarily always want the Ethereum Foundation to be so front and center. In many ways, actually, I think most people would have seen it as a little bit of an embarrassment that there's this nonprofit, semi-leadership type entity in Ethereum, so a lack of decentralization. But with that populist revolt, the EF very much took the role of like, we're going to lead the charge, like we're going to make sure everything gets done. And so that's, I think, an important element of it. Yet, with the Ethereum Foundation mandate specifically, and also DeFi Punk from earlier on, where these criteria are set out about what kind of projects would be supported by the EF, I think there was an attempt to signal that there are certain kinds of projects that would get supported. So if you are a project which has a particular types of licenses, so you have, it's not like sufficient, according to say DeFi Punk or the mandate, that you just have source available code. You also must be able to fork the code. In terms of censorship resistance, of course, like you should not be engaging in censorship resistance, but there's also this other very unique and novel addition, which is that if you find yourself in a durable, non-competitive position where somebody can't route around you, that even if you're not currently censoring, that still constitutes a type of latent or virtual censorship resistance. So I think it is a hardline statement about what the Ethereum Foundation wants to see, what it's willing to support, and implicitly then what it's not going to get involved in. So if we look at the Lazarus attack, and we saw DeFi United come along and everybody's raising money, one of the, I guess, the missing elements that people were expecting would have been the Ethereum Foundation gives some money, or Vitalik donates, or something along these lines. And I think that explicitly not engaging in that kind of support is in line with the current kind of crops values, that the ecosystem should be looking after more of itself. So I think what we're going to see is the EF maybe engaging in a mild subtraction. So subtraction as the ultimate end goal of the EF, that it should disappear when all of its functions have been fulfilled, when the Ethereum itself as a protocol has been ossified. But I think there's maybe a quiet quitting that's also occurring. So yeah, if you're not part of the crops alignment, that the EF is not going to intervene. Neo-Cypherpunk is a term coined by Rachel Rose O'Leary of DarkFi. It is also a term that's being popularized by Web3 Privacy Now. So that's, I think, where most people think of the term, that's probably where they've seen it. They've seen it being announced as the Neo-Cypherpunk Summit, all these kinds of events. In terms of its articulation, this is something that got overshadowed by crops and the Ethereum Foundation mandate. So, these days, if you say to someone, what are Ethereum's values, they would say probably crops. Personally, I would be of the team, I guess, that says that Neo-Cypherpunk is probably a better term to choose because it's more expansive. It tends to more explicitly focus on, say, decentralization, permissionlessness, credible neutrality, these terms that have diminished status relative to the, I guess, what's in the acronym. Another reason why I think it's an important term is we have a tendency to describe everything in historical terms when it comes to cypherpunk. So you're introducing someone to Ethereum or Bitcoin or the history of blockchains. You have to tell the story that goes back to the 80s and the 90s, leading up to Satoshi being influenced the cypherpunk mailing list. You tend to lose them. I know this from being a lecturer that, at some point the story is too far back in the rearview mirror for a, contemporary tech context. So I think we should be more mature and more and bolder in accepting that we have our own variant of cypherpunk, and that this variant is a story that should begin, let's say, maybe with Bitcoin, but even in Ethereum's case, it could begin with the story of Ethereum. And so this allows you to get straight into the discussion of, say, censorship, resistance, open source, and the specifics, as opposed to having to articulate this much wider history where, let's say PGP is an amazing technology, but is it relevant as an introductory element to, say, someone's beginning journey to understand Ethereum? I would say at this point, it's actually less helpful than helpful. Beginner-friendly tools. In the case of Ethereum, there are not many beginner-friendly tools. So if you want to actually have privacy, let's say, in terms of your financial activity, your options are relatively limited. So Tornado Cash, of course, would be one that you could use. It's no longer sanctioned, but of course, you never know, right? With the way that sanctions work. It's like, I guess it's temporarily unsanctioned, but who knows what happens with the next administration. You can also use more compliant tools, so privacy tools or Railgun. These are tools that enable privacy, but I would say the learning curve for these is relatively steep. So even people who are I guess long-term privacy advocates they may be able to use them, but I can't imagine, say, a newcomer to Ethereum doing so. And when it comes to, say, applications and products, I think the gold star here, the one that most people will name, is something like Fileverse, where it's not necessarily something that, let's say, is financial privacy. In fact, it's not financial privacy at all, but it's doing a huge, it's serving an underserved part of the Ethereum privacy story, which is having to use productivity tools. So having to use, say, a Google Docs, or an Excel, everything there, even actually PowerPoints, so giving presentations. Fileverse is I think with things like this, it's good if they have an explanation which can be done in, 2 or 3 words. And when I think of Fileverse, that essentially is, privacy Google Docs. It's an easy sell. It's easy to use. It's a tool where you technically don't even need to be using, say, the Ethereum element of it. You can just share documents with people. Minus all of the data collection. So that would be my main suggestion is Fileverse. Yeah, why is privacy important? This is a philosophical question that people have struggled with for a very long time. In my case, I've always taken it that we quite clearly our societies are very clearly built to enable privacy. I mean, we all like to live in private homes. You don't want people to be able to see everything that you're doing. We all have an innate sense of privacy in our, let's say, physical, real world business. You're going around, even letters, right? You don't sort of send letters without a cover. So there's information that you want to keep to yourself. There's information that you want to selectively reveal, as the famous quote from the Cypherpunk Manifesto. Actually, something that turns up in the Ethereum Foundation mandate is they also mention this ability to selectively reveal yourself. So I think that that's a natural, normal desire to have. There's nothing strange about it. And then if we move a little bit into the online world, there's this, at some point, and this is where this happened in the story is hard to pinpoint, we start opening our letters. We just presume that every random service that you use is allowed to peep into your private affairs and business and keep records and logs. That became normalized, not because we accepted it, but because we didn't really have a choice. If you want to be an everyday participant in in a workplace, a modern workplace, you are just your privacy is just completely taken from you. So. So from my view, it's just a logical extension of your basic desire for privacy in the physical world as extended to the online realm. How would the world look like if we had more crops aligned, let's say political context? I think, so I always think in terms of dystopia. So I am, someone who, I agree with Assange's idea that the job of, say, a cypherpunk essentially is to hold back the coming dystopia as much as possible. And I guess the problem with that dystopian vision is that sometimes you don't think about the positives, right? What exactly would that be like? And here I also would tend to agree with someone like Samuel Konkin that really the best you can do in the inherited political configuration that we have is to carve out these parallel spaces, gray zones, where you can enjoy your freedoms without the sense of being observed by people you don't want to be observing you. And so if Ethereum is contributing to that, if it's extending the agorist, the way that Konkin describes this is it's almost like a type of acid that's like eating away at the mass surveillance, totalized, controlled elements of society. So I would imagine Ethereum or privacy enabling tools as expanding and holding open that space for us to operate in ways where we are not acting according to the eyes of the panopticon, because the panopticon is not there, because a lot of our behavior is, of course, essentially being dictated by the sense of being observed. And the lack of privacy online is probably a contributor to this. And so I like to imagine, if I was trying to think like idealistically or positively, that we would have like new behaviors that were more aligned with our actual inner sense of self.